Cool. So my name is Ivan, and I'm an interactive artist and filmmaker based out of San Francisco. I run a small creative studio there, and before that I worked at Wieden Kennedy Amsterdam about 3 years ago, and before that at an ad agency called Malleable Partners in San Francisco. And today I'd like to go through 6 projects that I've done, or I guess experiments, and talk about how taking risks, breaking rules, and I guess following my creative passion has taken me to some really interesting places. And I really look at creative projects as like a journey. And I guess my hope, or my hope for the takeaway after this is to kind of embody that with these projects to make it really accessible for you guys to understand that. Yeah, so this first project I did in college, and this is me when I was 13. You can see I'm a big basketball fan, particularly the New York Knicks. That's me dunking a Knicks basketball into a Knicks basketball hoop with a Knicks necklace hitting me in the face. So I'm a big Knicks fan. And back in 2007, they had a coach that was really dropping the ball. And there was a big grassroots movement to fire him. And I was in a screen printing class at the time, and I made a t-shirt that said, "Don't hate the player or the game, hate the coach." And that's his likeliness. And I ended up going to Madison Square Garden where the Knicks play and sold the shirts for $20. And it was really cool to like see people put on the shirts and wear this, something that I just kind of like made. And as the call to fire this coach got stronger and stronger, all these really interesting things happened. One was someone traded me a seat that was 4 seats from court for 1 shirt. And so I got to see the game, and I got to meet Walt Frazier, who signed this shirt. He's like a Knicks legend. There also ended up being a lot of reporters that came to the games and would film me selling the shirts. I was interviewed on a lot of radio stations. And every time I went to like a new game, I'd sell more shirts. And I was only spending $5 on them, turning them around for 20 bucks. So as a college student, I was like doing pretty well. And then on the 4th game I was immediately arrested. Took me away in handcuffs, put me into a holding cell. It was totally ridiculous. It was as soon as I got there. I hadn't even been selling shirts yet, but as soon as I got out of the holding cell, I called the papers. They did this big story. And from there, all these media outlets picked it up. I was interviewed on ESPN radio. My favorite basketball magazine, Slam, featured the shirt. And so I wasted no time and made a website where people could buy the shirts online and sold hundreds. And so it was a really interesting turn of events. Later on, a lawyer who read about the thing contacted me. We ended up suing the city of New York, and they settled with us. So they dropped the charges. I got a little pocket change out of it. And then a year later, when I was looking for jobs in advertising, I ended up getting a job at Venables Bell, which is a pretty good shop in San Francisco. And the creative director was really clear with me that the reason I got hired was because of this project. And so I thought that was really interesting to reflect that getting arrested, which is something that is thought of as like not really a good career move, ended up getting me my first job. And so this is kind of a theme that I'll go through in a lot of the projects, is like we have these rules, there's these rules in life that more or less people follow. And as I've done more projects, I've realized that these rules are actually quite bendable, and they don't actually, I don't know how real they are. So at said job, I was working my ass off, and I remember the first week that it was kind of quiet, I was out to lunch with a friend talking about plans for the weekend. And we were trying to describe the future weekend, but there was ambiguity when he said next weekend. Because if it's a Monday and I say next weekend, which weekend is that? I want an answer from you. Weekend coming up. If I say next weekend and it's a Friday, what weekend is it? So that's a problem. The word next means different things at different points in time. And we wanted to solve that problem, so we invented oxt weekend. It's the new way to say not this weekend, but the weekend after. Eliminates next, so it's either this weekend or oxt weekend. We just had too much time on our hands and did this in a day. But he's an interactive coder, and so that's like you can scroll over the calendar and it moves. And we just put it out there and kind of forgot about it. And then we got an email from someone in Chile who said, I've been in love with the idea of this and oxt since I saw your site. In Spanish, there's the same confusion between este this and proximo next. So I've been trying to get my friends and coworkers to use oste as a translation of oxt. And I thought it was so cool to have that word translated and to influence culture in that way. And that was kind of the extent of that project. And then 5 years later, this is like in the last couple weeks, the site Vox did a whole story about Oxford Weekend. I don't know how they found out about it, but they say the new word that will make your life slightly simpler forever. Then The Guardian last week just picked it up and did a whole story on Oxford Weekend. And it's totally ridiculous. Like, this is not something that deserves news. My collaborator and I were like talking about how we both lost a little bit of respect for The Guardian after they picked up our word. But it was really interesting to follow along on Twitter. Someone said, I'm 100% sold on this Oxford Weekend thing. This is so dumb. You just call the weekend nearest this weekend, the second nearest next weekend. God. And it was interesting to see the like back and forth. I've been using this phrase in emails at work for a couple of months now, and no one has questioned it. If anyone says Ox Weekend to me, I'm punching them in the face. Ox is coming, and someone made some sort of image that resembles a meme. Start trying to make Ox happen. It's going to happen. I think that's from Mean Girls.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Just a guess. I'd pay top dollar to watch a syphilitic boar tear apart whoever's behind flower beards and oxed. I think that's my favorite. And so just reflecting on this silly word that we invented 5 years ago turned into, I mean, I'm calling it international debate, but it ended up being people talking about this thing and really having a lively debate about it. And I just think that's really interesting that came out of it.
Why ox? How did you come up with the word?
After next, N, O. That was as much thought as we gave it. Like, we did not put time into this. Okay, so I was working at Wieden+Kennedy and ended up quitting after just 6 months. I was really torn about it, and it was like the hardest decision I'd made in my life up until that point, because I'd gone there, it was my dream job, and then it immediately just wasn't working out. And I had to make the decision to leave early, pay back a lot of the money that they had spent to move me across the world. You know, what is that going to look like to my peers that I'm like a failure in leaving? But it was something that I felt like I had to do. And I'm getting ahead of myself a little, but letter writing had always been something that I'd been interested in. And this is, I think, probably the first letter I ever wrote. That's the mailbox I had growing up. And so when I did go to Wieden, I stopped writing letters, and I was just so busy working. And so after I ended up working a lot and deciding to leave Amsterdam, I wanted to do something that would encourage me to, like, motivate me to write more letters and also turn other people on to letter writing. How many people here have sent or received a handwritten letter in the last week? No hands. How about in the last month? One hand. In the last year? About a quarter, half the people? Yeah. So I think that's probably a fair demographic. Not that many people are actively sending handwritten letters or receiving them. And I wanted to turn this experience of like sending emails, which I don't need to ask you to raise your hand about emails, we all get tons of emails, into something like that. And so I created this project called Snail Mail My Email, where I invited anyone in the world to send me an email that would then be transcribed into a letter, sent anywhere in the world for free. It could also have a lipstick kiss, a spray of perfume, a doodle, a flower petal, to play up the tangible nature of letter writing. And for the first 4 days I sent the site to some family and friends. I just made a basic web page and got maybe 5 letters per day. And it was really neat to look into. It felt very voyeuristic. Even though they knew that I was going to be translating it or transcribing it, it still was really cool to see, like, what does a letter from you to you look like? And I got to be the in-between. And then on the 4th day, Gizmodo picked up the project. And from there, a heap of other media outlets picked it up. And so I got over 1,000 letter requests that day. So it went from like 5 to 1,000. I was like, fuck. Okay, this is a screenshot, and you can see within 8 minutes, 20 letter requests have come through. And I ended up having like friends and family were helping me write letters, and it still wasn't fast enough. And so I ended up having to take the project down and put a note on the website letting people know what was going on. And then I got an email from this girl, Lucy, living in Shanghai. And she said, I love letter writing, I saw your project, and I'd love to volunteer as a letter artist. And together, I remember we Skyped that day and realized that was probably the only sustainable way of going forward, was to crowdsource a bunch of letter artists. And that's what we did. In the course of 3 days, we assembled a huge team. Pretty much every role we needed, we would just post it on the website, super lo-fi, and meaning there wasn't a really intricate way of getting it out. It was just people that went to the website would see this note. And we had photo editors for photo editing. We had location trackers to pinpoint where in the world the letter was going to. And we had our letter artists as well as managers. I'd love to share with you guys a couple of the letters from the project. I asked everyone to document them before they were sent out. So this is what the letter request would look like coming in. Dear Miss Lewis, it was 1964 and it felt as though you were the only person who believed in me. You took the time to find the specialness inside each and every one of us, and I, for one, will never forget you. And you can just see like the palpable difference between like that email and then what this stranger created. And so the person, just to remind you guys, that's writing this doesn't know Miss Lewis and doesn't know Cindy. They were just like compelled for whatever reason to help out. And we had a whole variety of letters. Oh. Andy, while you're hard at work, I'm at home making blueberry pancakes while naked. Dear Ryan, stop being a dumbass and write your grandma a letter once in a while. Yours truly, yourself. And so we had people writing letters to themselves. I think it was something about receiving a letter in a stranger's hand that made it more like able to take in. We had letters going all around the world in all different languages. We have Czech, French, and Portuguese here. And a lot of times the people writing letters wouldn't even know what language they were writing in, which is interesting to reflect on. Letters of acceptance from the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. We had marriage proposals. I like this one because I imagine you're writing a letter and you have to write "I love you" 60 times, but you don't know who it's going to and you don't know who it's from.
You have to write in threads. You have to write in threads.
In threads?
Threads.
Oh, in threads?
Yeah.
I mean, we told the letter artists to write as like anything they were comfortable with, they'd write. There were a couple instances where it felt like it was not appropriate, and so they flagged it, and we had a whole system of people that were like vetting letters. And so yeah, it was a really wide variety of effort. We had a school in the Czech Republic whose art teacher assigned this for one of their classes, or maybe it was their English teacher. But that was kind of crazy. Here are the letters that they sent out. And so this was a 30-day project in the summer of 2011. And over those 30 days, over 10,000 letters got sent to 70 countries. And we had 234 volunteers. And the volunteers paid for all of the postage, which was totally like crazy. Here's some of the recipients with their letters. I am absolutely charmed by this project, and now I am the proud owner of a drawing of an alligator whose artist I will never meet. This touches me in such a unique way. Here's a letter we got from a volunteer that was helping out with the project, and she says, in a world where we move so rapidly from one thing to the next, this project in its unique simplicity has helped reconnect me with humanity. And I felt like that right there like said a lot more than I could say about it. And the project turned into a book, which is a really cool thing to have happen, and the fact that now the letters can live on in a more tangible form. And so for me, it was like, the takeaway I think of is like I quit my job with no plan B after 6 months, which is something you don't do. Like you're not supposed to do that. Conventional wisdom told me not to do that. And I ended up connecting thousands of people through letter writing and publishing my first book. And so again, I'm kind of coming back on that notion of like should and what role that plays in our lives or in my life. And this is just to show, these are possible domain names before I had a name for the project. And I'm looking at snail mail me, handwritten letter, handwritten email, snail mail my email. Because I feel like it's sometimes, when I look at a project that's like had a lot of engagement, it's easy to forget that like at one point that was just an idea. And so for me, it's really helpful to come back to this and be like, oh, this is like, it just happened, but it all started somewhere. And I really believe that like if any of you have an idea that interests you or you think could be interesting, like there's so much value in experimenting and just putting it out there. And I have tons of projects that don't get the kind of engagement I'm dreaming for, and I think there's value in like still going. And so now, Snail Mail My Email is a week-long event held annually. And so if you're interested in either volunteering or just having a letter sent by a stranger to someone you know, you can do that. So I'm in town right now because, actually I don't want to, I'll get to that, but During the Occupy protests in 2011, my buddy and I were like sympathetic of the drastic wealth disparity in America, and we're interested in helping out, but not so interested in like the polarization that that movement brought. There was a lot of like, I'm either really for or really against, and we thought the facts alone spoke for themselves, and so we decided to print infographics about the wealth disparity in America on dollar bills, a medium that naturally circulates. And so this is like the beginning phase where we were just like testing different stamp designs. And we would joke about how like if the wrong person walked into his apartment, it was literally like every flat surface was covered with dollar bills. It was pretty dodgy. But here's what the finished bills look like. This is the US disparity of wealth. And you can see that the 400 richest Americans have as much wealth as the bottom 150 million. I feel like that's a pretty interesting statistic to think about. This is the average worker pay versus average CEO pay. So you can see like that top left is the worker pay, and then the whole canvas is the CEO pay. Share of income growth in America over time. The US distribution of wealth. And it says future property of the 1%. And so we brought these to protests. We also stamped people's money. And we also made it non-hierarchical and open source so that people can print money on their own using the stamp designs, like the EPS files, or just using their home printer. And we were happy with the outcome. Someone says, these figures are actually terrifying. I'm starting to understand the Occupy protests finally. If this doesn't make people wake up and think, nothing will. The project took a really interesting turn of events when we were contacted by Ben Cohen's assistant, Ben of Ben & Jerry's, and we were just going back and forth with her, and then I called once to talk to her, and she's like, oh, Ben's right here, do you want to talk to him? And I remember like running up, like where I was, I like went to a private room and was like talking to Ben Cohen, like the guy that makes like my favorite ice cream. And he's really politically inclined and just liked the project. And he had some nice things to say about it. Occupy George is a beautiful way for the Occupy movement to spread its message. I met up with him a couple times, which has been fun. Can anyone guess what his favorite flavor of ice cream is?
Vanilla.
Not vanilla.
Yeah, Ben & Jerry's.
He doesn't eat ice cream.
Okay. He does eat ice cream. Cherry Garcia is his favorite. He pays me $5 for every time I include that. The dollar bill is featured in a couple of books, which is neat. And then, have you guys heard of Ars Electronica? It's a new media art festival in Austria, and we were actually, my partner and I that made this, were invited out for that festival, and it was actually like a free flight to Europe, which is pretty cool. And it was just wild to see this project that we had done like in his like small one-bedroom apartment, like in this kind of museum-esque context. And then I remember I went to Budapest after, and was just hanging out in the baths, and just reflected on like, this is so weird. I'm like hanging out in a bath in Budapest, and this is all because I was like making this stamp for a protest. Like, the world's fucking weird. And the reason I'm here is that the V&A is exhibiting a show called Disobedient Objects, and the Occupy George is exhibiting in that. They also commissioned us to do one for the £5 note. And so this shows that the top 0.1% is like the whole figure of Wiz, and then the bottom 90% is this little dot. This is 1975. In 2011, the dot has actually gone down, but you can see the top 0.1% income has gone up by much and much. And so defacing dollar bills, which is something that's like kind of seedy and not like possibly illegal, led to meeting Ben of Ben & Jerry's, 2 trips to Europe, having art in a museum. And again, like I think it's wild to reflect on where projects can go. And like there's so many ideas we have brewing, but I don't know, I've been really floored at just how taking action and doing something can lead to really crazy shit. I'm gonna get some water. I worked at Facebook for 2 months as a contractor, and the assignment was to come up with a campaign for when they hit 1 billion users. And one of the insights that I had was that Facebook kind of encourages breadth over depth, meaning that I can have a lot of quick conversations on Facebook, but they're not necessarily going to be as deep and meaningful. I don't know if you guys can relate. And so the brief kind of became, how can we make Facebook have more intimacy? And then I was looking at a friend's profile picture and realized when I draw someone's portrait, there's a real like intimate thing that happens when I like look into someone's face. And for anyone that's drawn a portrait of someone, there's a really visceral, tangible connection. And so we came up with this idea of strangers across the world drawing each other's Facebook profile pics. And we pitched this to Facebook, who liked it, but it didn't end up aligning with their internal policies. And so they suggested that we partner, or try to partner with brands and their partners. And everyone loved it, but the same questions kept coming up. What if people don't participate? What if someone doesn't like their portrait? There's too many points of friction, or what if someone draws an inappropriate picture? And it really felt like people were getting hung up on the wrong questions, and it ended up not being made through a partnership because there was just a lot of concerns. And so this is kind of like, I think, representative of a lot of like agency culture from my experience, where there can be a really fresh idea, but because it isn't proven or there's not a precedent for it, it can get killed. And I really think that like there's value in doing new stuff. So we spent a year and kind of were able to find a little bit of funding and just spent a lot of time, and we built this project. So you choose your profile picture, you hand draw it, and then it gets submitted. And so here are a couple examples of what people have drawn. And it was cool just to see the variety, as well as the time that some people spent on their portrait. And these are people that don't know each other, just randomly connected. I was using a lot of insights from the snail mail, my email project. And it was just cool to see how people stylized these drawings, or how they would add or subtract different elements. It's cool that someone can make a portrait using a shoestring, batteries, some Q-tips. This was made by someone in the Congo. He's saying, 5 cheeseburger, please. And so here's an example where we kind of got creatively hacked. Someone realized that we were putting the before and after one stitched together, and so they just made an extension. I thought that was a pretty cool outside of the box thinking. I also really enjoyed seeing someone like draw. It just feels a lot more tangible if you were to like draw a stranger on your body. And what's the way of taking that to the next level? So this is Joey from California on the left. This is Amarildo from Brazil on the right. That's a drawing by a tattoo artist of Amarildo. That's Joey getting a tattoo of Amarildo from Brazil. Guy gets butt tattoo of stranger's Facebook profile pic. And so this project's been live for about a year and a half now. We've had over 50,000 portraits from 149 countries. We've been really happy with the results from that. Again, this is just from my notebook. Like, what if people did portraits for each other? You draw my face, I'll draw someone else's. I know, I just think it's so important to for me and for other people just to remind ourselves that everything starts from like a stupid little idea. And I'm sure in like everyone here's notebooks or like text edit documents, there's like ideas that are really fucking powerful and awesome. And so I really want to like drive home the notion of like, just do it. So getting rejected by Facebook and a heap of brands led to connecting people around the world through creativity and inspiring one guy to get a stranger's face tattooed on his ass. So one more project to walk you through. I'm really fascinated with technology and how there's this like paradox of how technology connects us all, but at the same time, sorry, one second. No. It alienates us, right? Like I'm connecting with someone here, but I'm totally checked out with you guys. And so these are a couple of photos I've snapped in San Francisco. And I just think it's so interesting to like, I'm looking around and it's just everyone's totally, and I don't mean to be like holier than thou here. Like I'm on my phone a lot too. I'm totally guilty of this. I just think it's a really fascinating phenomenon. I was in line here at this cafeteria, and out of the, I think 8 people in front of me, 7 are on their phones. Like you can see like all 7 people except for this guy. All these other people are on their phones. And I feel like I'm closed out from those other people. They're just like in phone world. And so I've been doing this social experiment, and I'd love to try it with you guys. Could I ask you to pair up? Actually, I'm going to ask you to pair up. and ask each other what's the last photo on your phone and just provide a brief backstory. Yeah, I've been really interested in talking to people that are on their phones or just asking about like what's on your phone, and I decided to go around the city of San Francisco where I live and just ask people that question, and was really pleased with the results. And so I've gone around now to LA, Los Angeles, New York, Miami, and Alabama, and I plan on going to like doing this here on Saturday, just asking people on the street what's the last photo on your phone. And yeah, so I've been to these places, and I'd love to show you kind of a quick montage of some of the videos.
This past weekend, we all went to Bodega Bay and just did a whole bunch of shrooms. We were high on Molly, and we went to the beach, so I found a crab, and it was all kind of like in different pieces, so I put it back together, and I thought it was really cool, so.
Oh, yeah, that's my husband's gravestone, and he's been gone 5 years. So that particular day I had gone with my grandson and my son, and we just enjoy going there.
I sent my friend a picture of a deli slicer that I bought, and I have a shitload of beef. So I'm gonna roast a lot of it and make sandwiches.
This is a picture on my dining room wall of a beautiful, gorgeous goddess. And you should zoom in and see this, because this is a stunning picture. And I literally sent it out to a bunch of my friends as inspiration.
That was a bad one-night stand. That didn't end good. Now she's a stalker.
So this is a picture of my beloved van, Conrad, going up in flames. We had pulled over from driving down from San Francisco on our way to a music festival. We came out and the van was on fire, but the silver lining of the story is the kindness that people showed us. People offering us rides, people offering us money, people offering us the truck stop, giving us showers and letting us do our laundry. I mean, it was heartwarming.
It's been really awesome to just talk to random people on the street and find out about the last photo on their phone. And as you can tell, a lot of times like the photo is kind of inconsequential. Like in the case of that last opera singer, the photo was just a dorm room, but just through talking to someone, this organic story can emerge. And so I found that really interesting. And so I've been doing this project now, and this will be the 6th city or area, and I did the math, and it's been over like 500 conversations with strangers. We've had over 650,000 views, and one of the videos was a Vimeo staff pick, which is a pretty like prestigious honor in filmmaking. And so it's been really neat just to have that greater exposure. And I was actually interviewed on national television in the US about this project. So it's cool to be forewayed by these reporters, including Crystal Ball on the bottom left, her actual name. But what was cool about the exposure is that then a lot of people reached out to me and said like, hey, I'm a filmmaker, I'd love to partake in this project. Would you mind if I did like a last photo in my local city or area? And I was like, sure, please do. And so far there have been versions that you can see online in Slovenia, in Brazil, in Germany, the Netherlands, in France, and a couple of places on the West Coast as well. And that's been really cool because I can't go to all these different places, and I love the idea of like extending the project and just kind of open sourcing it. I got an email from a representative of L'Oreal about 6 months ago who had seen the project and reached out to me to commission me to do my own film piece. And so this was me in San Francisco doing a piece for, it didn't really have much to do with L'Oreal, but it was kind of inspired by a campaign they're doing. And it's on YouTube now. And it was just really cool to reflect on like talking to strangers, which is something that you're not really supposed to do. Like, I don't know about how it is here, but in the States you don't necessarily like just talk to people. And so that actually like inspired more people to talk to people. And it, like now I'm bidding on a project to do another commercial film like based on this style. and so that's something I never expected. So a lot of these projects have been like, I guess, like my most successful projects. I do tons of projects all the time that don't get any traction, or ones that get really little traction. This is a stencil I made called "I'm Not Sure What to Say," and it was cool to see someone's response a couple of days later. So I feel like I've said a lot of this, but to me, there's like so much value in checking out like what are the like societal cultural norms and being aware of them, but also knowing that they're totally malleable and that, yeah, taking risks and breaking rules for me has like brought a lot of value. And so I'd encourage you guys to check that out. This is a quote by Tibor Kalman. So this isn't my quote, but I just think there's so much merit in viewing things as an experiment. From my experience in advertising, it can be a lot of like preciousness or a lot of like pressure to perform, and I feel like the work that I'm most inspired by is very just like playful and experimental, and it kind of shows through. Trust the journey. I feel like I've tried to do a good job of showing this narrative arc of like a starting off point and then like a totally different than I expected ending point. And so I've kind of just realized like I'm just gonna do shit, and some of it might have a result that I want and some of it might not, but I'm pretty converted to this ideology of just like doing it and trusting in whatever. Yeah, and I really just like hit home again. There are these ideas that we all have of how things should be, and like I think there's so much value in questioning that. So yeah, I really appreciate your time and for being able to come here. So thanks, guys.